Welcome, everyone. I think at this point, I've got a little after 6:30 on my clock here in my office. So why don't we get started? I know that we're going to record tonight's session and we'll make that available to the community. And I'm sure that folks will join us as we have this conversation tonight. I appreciate everyone that was able to take time out of their busy evenings. I know that everybody's got a lot on their plate to join us to talk about our new strategic plan. And I'm excited to have some of my colleagues here that have worked very hard on this and been a part of the whole process. And before we kind of launch into our presentation tonight in that conversation, why don't we start out with some introductions? So I'm Aaron Johnson. I'm your superintendent of schools. I'm happy to be here. I joined West Irondequoit back in 2019. And I'm going to pass it over to, why don't we pass it to Mrs. Cunningham?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Ann Cunningham. I am a parent. I have a daughter who is a senior at the high school this year. And I am currently serving on the school board as president, and very grateful to be in that position and to work along with my colleagues on the school board and all of the wonderful staff and serving our students as well. How about Mrs. Miga?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Christina Miga. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Instruction. Have been working in West Irondequoit for over 15 years and started my teaching career at Rogers and South Lawn, and have worked through a few different positions and have been just really impressed throughout all of my work here with the community, the strength of the community, and the commitment to our students. And that is mirrored in our staff as well. So really happy to be here tonight. Thanks.
I'll jump in. Hi, my name is Jeff DeVeronica. I'm the Director of Public Information. This is my fourth year with the district, and every single one has been really, really interesting. Former sports writer with the Democrat and Chronicle, and have been really excited to become a part of this district and see the great things that we do inside and out. And it's a great community. I was really happy to become a part of the school community, and looking forward to our presentation tonight. Let's throw it over to Mr. Brennan.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is James Brennan. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Finance here in the district. It's my 25th year in the district, but I'll say this is my first opportunity to be involved in developing a strategic plan. So that's really exciting, because I think one of the things that we all like about working in schools and education is every day is an opportunity to teach and opportunity to learn. And so this is a great forum to do both of those. So thanks for everyone for including me in this. And Michelle.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle Kramer, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources. I have been in the district since 2002 in multiple roles as a teacher, a K-3 principal, a 7-8 principal, and now as an assistant superintendent. I am excited to share with you components of our strategic plan tonight. So similar to what Mr. Brennan shared, even through all my years here, this is the first time I've had the opportunity to be part in creating and implementing a strategic plan. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
All right. So before we get into some of the slides, I just want to say a few more words here. You know, in joining West Irondequoit, I admired a lot of things when I came on board, but one thing that really stood out just was this strong sense of identity and sense of purpose that people shared, you know, and it was really grounded in our children. If you walk around our buildings or if you talk to our staff, you'll quite frequently hear a phrase like all means all, or every child belongs to each of us, you know, which really reflects the commitment that our school and our community has to just that, to making sure that every child has what they need, the supports, the resources, the relationships to flourish. And so you can see that reflected on this first slide at the bottom there. Welcome, nurture, and inspire. And that's just a kind of a summary of our mission here as a district. We want to make sure that every child is welcome in the district, that we nurture them, and then we inspire them and one another to the highest of heights in this whole idea of peak performance here as a district. Something that was extremely well crafted a number of years ago before I joined, along with some core commitments from the district. So when I was able to join the team here at West Irondequoit and go through my entry plan, a question that was commonly asked to me was, okay, so here's a new superintendent, you've had a chance to take a look at the district, what now, right? And so we talked a lot about that. And we went through probably a period of a year or a little bit more of getting to know one another and settling in under some new leadership. And thanks to the Board of Education and their forethought and thinking, we came upon the suggestion of exploring a strategic plan. We had this solid base, we had this turnover in leadership. People were interested in taking the next step in some of the things that we were doing. And we wanted to just kind of come around some of those thoughts. And this is really what this strategic plan embodies. So if we can go to the first slide, Jeff. So again, why strategic planning? I read a great article recently in the Onboard magazine from the New York State School Boards Association. It was just about kind of navigating difficult times, and certainly we're experiencing those with the pandemic, with some of the things that are happening in society and globally. And having a plan, having a firm sense of self is critical to being able to navigate and persevere through those ups and downs. And like I said, we had a great base. We had this, this solid mission, these core commitments. And so the next logical step was really going into this strategic plan. And it was something that brought us together. We took a significant amount of time just really assessing the current state of the district. What's going well? What are the strengths? What are some of the needs? What's the vision, right? How do we want to accomplish this mission that we've set for ourselves? And then really kind of shaped some of those things. And something that, you often hear in school districts is that, things are constantly coming out. Common Core, you got technologies coming out. We have new materials around STEAM and humanities and whatnot. I mean, we could go on, the list goes on and on. So how do we take all of those and kind of congeal those into a coherent plan that's inclusive of all of our people here and reflective of that vision? So that's really what we did. We created those goals, and we're going to share those with you tonight, along with some of those action steps that we've set to help us to reach those objectives. So we can go to the next slide, Mr. D. So working in the greater Rochester area here, we really have a tremendous partner in the Warner School of Education at the U of R. And, across the district, I think there was some different connections to the University of Rochester. And certainly they've been a leader in some of the work around urban education with the work that they're doing at the East EPO. So we reached out to them knowing that they had worked with some other local districts around strategic planning and kind of explored their platform. And we were impressed with that. And so working with the Board of Education, we brought them on board. And really what they were able to do for us is to introduce kind of a research-based platform for us to dive into gathering not only the quantitative data, but also the qualitative data from our members, whether it's our students, our staff, or our community members, and pulling all that together and then helping us, not pointing out what we should be looking at, but really just facilitating a conversation and a pathway of kind of discovery and looking at those things, organizing them, and really coming up with some themes for ourselves. And it was a really cool process. We had hundreds of people involved in informing that, through the qualitative measures, whether it's surveys or interviews or focus groups. And then we brought together a team of about 30 stakeholders. And again, it was a great cross-section of students, staff, board members, administrators, parents, and community members. And we spent 4 days combing through these materials. Jeff, can we go to the next slide, please? Thanks. So, you know, and in doing that, again, we were able to identify just a litany of strengths across the district. You know, one of the things that jumped right off the page, number one, was the people. I mean, people raved about our people. And it was just something, and again, if you go back to that whole idea of all means all, and you've worked with our staff here in the district, you know that they just go above and beyond. Their passion for learning, their passion for supporting students is endless. And so, you know, it wasn't a surprise for that to be one of the top ranked strengths. You know, our neighborhood schools was another thing that came up that was huge. The fact that we made this commitment to making sure that that nurturing that we talked about in our mission statement starts right from day one when the students enter kindergarten. And you can see that was something as we went through the pandemic and we watched some of the upheaval in local districts. I'll tell you, that was one of the major things that helped us to stay grounded and really help to support our students and families through, you know, through the lowest of lows in the last 2 years, was just having that really tight knit type of a quote unquote family structure with those neighborhood schools. And that really, you can see that really play up through all of their grade levels as students advance. And I think that's one of the many things that makes our district very special. So again, I could go through a lot of the different strengths that surfaced in the district, but we also found some opportunities in there. And that's really what we're going to talk about tonight. And we landed on what if you've had a chance to look at our strategic plan in the brochure that went home, we call these our focus areas, but probably more frequently our big rocks. These are the things that are kind of the major themes in the district that regardless of what comes, whether it's, you know, another pandemic, whether it's, you know, something around state funding, you know, just pick your poison. If there's something that comes up that could distract us, these are the things that we're committed to, that we're going to stay focused on because they're important to our people. So we're going to get into those. But I mentioned there, if you caught that, everyone in the district received our strategic plan bulletin, okay? And if you have that handy, that might be something that's useful for you tonight as an attendee here with us. And really, again, the purpose of this is not only to present information. In 1 hour, we couldn't possibly go through everything in this plan. It would take us probably a full day, okay? And we've done that with our staff and our board really combing through this. But we want this to be a conversation. So as questions pop up, if you've been in a Zoom webinar before, you know that this can be interactive. And we have a small group here with us tonight. So what you can do as a participant, if you have a question, you can just type it into the Q&A, okay? We'll make sure that it goes into the Q&A because that's what Mr. DeVeronica is going to watch, and we'll bring that up. And we're going to kind of go section by section through the plan, okay? You can also raise your hand as an attendee, and we're going to look for that as well. What we can do there is bring you up your audio, and you can actually ask your question live and interact with our panel in that way. And it'll just kind of be a little more personal type of interaction there. And maybe your initial question leads to a follow-up question. And that's great. That's the purpose of this. So before I move on, I want to point out one important piece, and that's the ownership. If you go to the back of your strategic plan bulletin, which by the way, Mr. DeVeronica and Mrs. Hartman, who are the base of our public information office, did a tremendous job in distilling down tens of pages of strategic plan into this easy to use guidance document. So we hope that's helpful to folks. along the way. But if you go to the back of it, it has a statement there that is on your screen. I just want to read because I think it's powerful just around the ownership of this plan. We refer to the focus areas of our strategic plan as the big rocks. You can't move rocks that size without a lot of hands pushing in the same direction. We extend sincere thanks to our planning council for their work on this 5-year plan. It was comprised of Board of Education members, our staff, students, parents, and community members. And that's really the point of this. This is a lot of work. And districts launch into this process with the highest of hopes, great intentions. And they make these fancy documents with all of these really specific commitments in them. And then they take them back to the district, they talk about them, and then they get distracted and they move on to whatever the emergency is or whatever, you know, the new initiative is. And it doesn't end up lifting the district as they intended it to. We've made a commitment for this to stay alive, okay? And for that to happen, it's going to take everyone. It's going to be an all hands on deck type of a effort here, where everybody from the top down to our community, even to our students, are going to help us to fulfill these themes that we're going to talk about tonight over the course of the next 5 years. So with that, I want to turn it over to Mrs. Cunningham. I know as a Board of Education member, you bring a certain perspective on this. I just wanted to give you a chance to kind of share some of your thoughts about the plan, about the process, and even about the vision of where we're going. Mrs. Cunningham.
Thank you. Dr. Johnson, you mentioned that we began with the mission statement. That happened, that process happened several years ago. So we came up with our mission statement and our core commitments, and that was done through a really extensive process of reaching out to our students, our staff, our parents, and the wider community through focus area groups and surveys, and taking a look at where we are as a district and as a community and where we wanted to go. We spent quite a bit of time writing that. We looked at other vision and mission statements across the area as well to help us guide that process. So I think that was, as you had mentioned, Dr. Johnson, that was a really important step for us to take and set the groundwork for us in this future process. This whole entire process has been fully supported by the entire school board, not only in a unanimous vote to go through with the process, but we are all heavily involved in the process. And providing input and leadership as far as that went. And several of us were on the planning council as well. It was a great process. We really came together. We were focused on our community, focused on our students most of all, and especially focused on our staff. And we're really, really excited to roll this out. I'm really proud of where we are and where we're moving as a district. We've been open, we've been honest, we've been transparent, and that I think is going to help us as we continue to roll this out. We've already done a lot of work. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but we've got commitment to see this through. And I think that is what is most important. So I am honored to have been a part of the process, and I'm really excited to see where we move the next 4.5 years. So thank you. I appreciate being able to be a part of all of this.
Thank you, Ann. Appreciate all the support and the guidance along the way. Certainly, our Board of Education is tremendously invested in our schools and our students. And we know that because they put a lot of heart and soul into what they do and a lot of time. So I just want to say thank you for everything that you do along with our other board members. So with this, I want to pause real quick and just see if there's any initial questions that anyone wants to pose. You can put them in the chat, you can raise your hand, and then we'll get into kind of the meat and potatoes of the plan. That teacher wait time there. We have one hand up.
Heading right there. I'm going to allow Mr. Andy Falaco. Your mic should be on, sir.
All right. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I got my 2-year-old sitting on my lap here, so I hope he doesn't,
That's what we're all
get
about.
too involved here. So a couple of questions before we get started. So I'm hearing, as you guys are getting started, this strategic plan, I mean, it's a done deal. This is like the plan. And not like, I guess I was thinking that maybe tonight might be an opportunity for feedback, potentially hearing more opinions from people. Is this more of a presentation style, and we might be able to ask questions if there's something that might be vague and jump on, or are you looking more at like sharing this with the community and saying, do you think this is the right path? I guess I'd want to know that before I think about what other questions throughout the course of the presentation that I might have.
Yeah, Andy, I think that's a fair question. I'm glad you asked that question up front. So it's kind of twofold. I described a bit of the process, and the process really, it was almost a year as far as the development of this. And it started with gathering all of the information, conducting those focus groups, those interviews, those surveys. And then Warner School, they did a great job of putting that into about a 100-page report for us. And so I'm describing this because we went through that, and then we brought those members of that planning committee together, and they went through all 100 pages of that with all of the, the hard data that we had as a district. We did a comprehensive review of our curriculum instruction, and then all of the input from our people, right? And then they took that and they looked at the themes, what were the strengths, what were the opportunities, what were the needs? So for us at this point to dive back into some of that, I think that would be dangerous and risky, Andy, just because we don't have all of that information in front of us, but we're certainly here listening. And if there's some feedback or some tips or some insight that you want to share along the way, we'll definitely take notes, and I'll explain how we might be able to use that and incorporate that into our work as we move forward. Something that folks may not know, for us to execute this plan, like I had said, to do it with fidelity over the next 5 years, it's going to involve really keeping eyes on this and maintaining a conversation almost on a daily basis and anchoring back. There's going to be other things that come up, no doubt. No doubt. There's going to be things that come up that we're going to commit to, that we're going to invest in. But these 4 things are the core initiatives, the core focus areas that our people had defined through the feedback and what the data showed us. And so every year, we're setting a management plan. We take a look at our strategic plan, and you can see in your bulletin that there are tasks that are labeled by year, things that we want to do in the first year, second year, third year, fourth year, and so on. And then we sit down and we really dive deep into that, and we make a detailed management plan on how we're going to do that, who's responsible, and then the deadline for getting that work done. And that's really, Andy, where the conversation goes. When you have feedback or thoughts, we can feed it into that too, and every year we're going to be doing that. I also think as we move through the process, 5 years is a long time. So we may find things, and there's change that happens, and we may have to refine parts of the plan. We're not going to overhaul the plan, but we recognize that there may be need for refinement along the way. So I'm going to pause again. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it answers the
Yes and
question.
no?
No, it answers the question, just not necessarily the answer I wanted, but
Okay.
speaking truthfully, but that's
Yep.
okay. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn it over here to some folks. We're going to go through the 4 big rocks, as you can see outlined there. What we came up with based on everything that was fed into the conversation. Our focus areas for the next 5 years are curriculum, instruction, implementation systems, well-being of self and community. Now, poured throughout that, you're going to see evidence of a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was a theme that came, there was another theme that came through loud and clear. And really, because that touches everything, as the group went through this and had that conversation, it wasn't fair to make that as a separate focus area, because really everything that we do as a district, we agreed that we want to make sure that we're looking at those things through that lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, the DEI lens. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. I think Ms. Miga is going to go first here with the curriculum piece. Take it away, Ms. Miga.
Thanks, Dr. Johnson. So yeah, we're going to start with a big rock that is near and dear to my heart, which is curriculum. And the overall objective for each of the components under curriculum for our strategic plan is as follows. It's to promote excellence, equity, and inclusion through a viable and guaranteed curriculum. So again, those are words that we have really clung to here in West Irondequoit and tried to emulate through our practices. But I really feel like they're taking on a new meaning through this strategic plan. And one of the major themes and pieces of feedback that kept coming through the strategic plan process, and really specifically in our curriculum and instruction big rocks, which I'll speak to next, was this idea of alignment and K-12 articulation. So one of the biggest goals that we can really work towards to achieve this objective of excellence, equity, inclusion, and hit those words of viable and guaranteed is to ensure that our curriculum and systems are aligned K through 12. So we're really looking at that holistic experience for our students and not just looking at what's that curriculum look like at K3, at 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 12. So that is something that really came out through this process. And one of our big goal areas in order to achieve that was criteria for process. And that's where the majority of our initial work under the curriculum big rock lays. Because under criteria for process, if you've seen the document, it references how we need to take some time to analyze and revise our existing systems to promote that stronger alignment, to ensure college and career readiness, and also to make a shift where our curriculum, as Dr. Johnson spoke to, really does promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, again, across K through 12. So that's a pretty big task when you think about making sure that your curriculum represents that across all grade levels. And so in order to do that, we're really taking this year to look at what is our definition of curriculum, what is going to be our common template K through 12, and then how are we going to ensure that the common template for curriculum development, and again, curriculum is really the heart of education. It's what guides instruction, guides the learning that happens in our school. And so it's really a framework for our teachers and staff to follow. And so we really want to ensure that not only are we making sure that our curriculum is promoting that rigorous college and career ready aligned instruction, but it's also promoting and has certain components that allows our curriculum to be inclusive, so that students see themselves throughout the curriculum K through 12, that it is culturally responsive. So it is, again, responsive to the students sitting in front of the classrooms and that are engaging in the learning. And so again, we're going to continue to do that work this year. We're engaging in audits of all of our curriculum. And then, like I said, going to choose a common template and then look at the curriculum that we have in existence, and then make some adjustments, and really over the course of the following years, think about what our cycle for review and revision of our curriculum is. And that'll be a really important piece as well, because that's what's going to allow us to remain flexible as we know, state standards can shift, or there can be different calls to action from our New York State Education Department. And so we have to be able to respond to those, but it's also going to allow us to revise any curriculum as needed based on our the needs of our students in our ever-changing world. And so that revision review process, which we have a process in place right now, but again, want to make sure that it's that K-12 aligned process, and also something that happens on a regular basis, and it is very clear to all of our stakeholders, particularly our staff that has to implement the curriculum. And so we're going to continue to work on that. That's also going to, as I mentioned, enable us to think deeply about what does it mean to be college and career ready. And those components come out quite frequently through the strategic plan on what can we do to analyze not only the needs of our students, but what is the workforce, what are careers, colleges, et cetera, looking for from a graduate. And so we're going to take that into consideration, and then really use that information to backwards plan, so that, you know, we are supporting students in any venture that they might have after their high school careers. And so we'll continue to do that, like I said, while thinking and being really mindful to include those elements of DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for each stage of the process or goal area for curriculum, we also are going to think about, as time goes on, what will be the accountability measures that we put in place as a district to ensure that the revision happens and that the curriculum is implemented. And then if we go to the next slide, oh, thank you. The other major component of our curriculum, Big Rock, is data-driven instruction. This is a term that's very familiar here in West Irondequoit, where we effectively utilize data to inform curriculum and student achievement. But again, I go back to that K-12 alignment. How do we ensure that there are systemic pieces across K through 12 that help us to utilize the data that we have in the most effective way? And so one of those tools, for example, is going to be the creation of a common K-12 data protocol, so that our staff is all looking at data in a similar way. So that if you have a student, for example, who's transitioning from Rogers or Iroquois to Dake, the data or the information that is being sent with that student makes sense to the teachers at a completely different building and a new grade level. And so we're just trying to make some of that language really common across those areas and vocabulary, so that there's a deeper understanding. And again, that the data, we never want to just collect assessment data or observational data or anything for that matter that has to do with students that isn't having a direct impact on their learning. So this will be an important part for us to think about, how can we improve the pieces that we already have in place, and then create some new systems that help us to drive even deeper with data. And that transitions us nicely to the second big rock, which is instruction. And within our instructional, and you can go to the next slide. Within our instructional big rock, our major objective is to establish instructional practices to ensure success for all learners. And the most important product of our strategic plan, and one that we are working on currently this year and hope to have at least that first draft by the end of this year, is the creation of a K-12 instructional model. We have some really sound research-based instructional practices that are happening in West Irondequoit on a daily basis. But this work is going to allow us to reflect on what are those practices. And again, think about what are those practices that you walk into any West Irondequoit classroom you can ensure are in place. And then we'll go a little bit deeper and think about what are the practices at specific grade level bands that, again, we want to ensure are going to be in place for our students. So for example, This is just one example, but we've had a strong focus on science-based reading practices. And so we have it articulated in some of our handbooks, but how do we make that part of our instructional model, whether it's at particular grade bands or across K-12, to ensure that those are the pieces of instruction that are happening on a daily basis for our students. So that is the major work of the instructional model. And again, thinking about how we are going to bring all of our stakeholders in to understand that instructional framework. So this work has currently been going on as we start to dive in through school-based planning teams, which has both staff and parent representation, department meetings, faculty meetings, and we're in kind of gathering our information stage, but going to dive into the research and look at those best practices in which we can leverage in the classrooms. And of course, the final step to this, as I mentioned with curriculum, will be how are we going to ensure this instructional accountability and alignment moving forward. So step one for both curriculum and instruction, put some really strong process pieces in place. Step two, what is the systemic pieces we're going to put in place to make sure it keeps happening? And one of the other pieces that lives within the instruction big rock are grading practices. We are going to look over the course of this 5-year plan at how we can create and implement consistent and meaningful and equitable standards-based grading system. It's certainly a topic that our district has begun to research. We have a standards-based report card already for grades K through 4, but really looking to see how that work can continue to drive K through 12. So again, matching that theme of alignment K through 12 and what's best for students.
So do we want to pause there and just, I know we have one question in the Q&A.
Yeah.
And then if there's anyone else, I see we have a hand up as well, so we can answer both of these. And if there's other questions, we can address those as well. So the question is, can you specify what science-based reading methods the district uses?
Sure. So I'm not sure exactly, if you're asking when you say methods for programs or, but I'll answer and then see if I hit it for you. But so we have made a really conscious shift to follow the practice behind science-based reading, which is looking at the four-part processor. I'm going to try not to get too technical, but looking basically at how do you build those solid literacy foundational skills for students, and then build upon those to make sure all of our students are successful. So we have engaged in something called letters training, but also have really focus on boosting our instruction and making it more of an expectation to have strong phonics, phonemic awareness instruction throughout the day. So we have different programs that we utilize to support that, but it really is the 5 components of reading and making sure that those are taught through our workshop model at the elementary level and beyond.
Thanks, Chrissy.
Yeah.
Chris, did that answer your question? If not, we'll take a follow-up. But with that, Jeff, can we go to the person with their hand up?
It's Mr. Flacco again. Wanted
Okay.
to speak and
Thank you.
add something. Mr. Flacco, you're good to go again.
Yeah, sorry, guys. I'm glad I'm not the only person here tonight because I'm going to have quite a few questions, and you'll probably want to edit me out to shorten this thing down when all is said and done. I understand that, but so Superintendent Johnson, you mentioned early on that a part of this whole process, and Warner helped you with this and whatever. You were looking at. Good night, sweetheart. I love you. You're looking at strengths and weakness. Well, you probably didn't say weaknesses, but opportunities, or however you want to call it. And I know it's tough for districts to open up and own up to weaknesses. But I mean, I noticed, I don't see how anyone couldn't notice, and I'm glad you guys mentioned it, that DEI is all over this whole thing. It's dominant. So I'm wondering was that a weakness of our district that caused this to be such a strong focus compared to just about everything else? I guess I'll start with that one.
No, I would not say. I just pulled out the strategic planning report here. DEI wasn't labeled as a weakness. It was really an opportunity. I think what really came out of the conversations, Andy, with the focus groups and the survey questions, was an interest and a commitment to making sure that what we do, how we treat one another, how our students are and people are reflected and represented across the district, whether it's curriculum or facilities or what have you, that it's really inclusive, that it's, we're making sure that we're accounting for the diversity, again, whether it's what we teach, our staff, and making sure that our staff reflects the community that we serve, and that what we do is equitable. I think that's probably the most direct way of answering that. So it was an opportunity and a very clear point of emphasis from the feedback that we gathered.
Okay. I know for me, myself, and the teachers that I've spoken to in the district, I'm an alumni of West Irondequoit. I've maintained a lot of friendships with teachers that are still there. There's been a lot of turnover because I feel like an old man now, but for the teachers that are still there, I have good rapport with a lot of them, families in the district. I know a lot of, at least from the people I talk to, just wanting to know what some of this looks like, more DEI in, hold on, buddy. DI being, infused into the curriculum, particularly at younger levels. Let's call a spade. There's some horror stories right now, like out there in the national press, and you can't believe all of that, but it does raise alarms a little bit, and you want to make sure that while so much of this is important, that it's done in a very careful way. And I don't know. I just saw how dominant that was. But anyway, I'll move on to my instruction question. I'm sorry, that was rambling a little bit. Looking at this, I'm wondering where technology kind of fits in to the mix here. I was really hoping that there would be a very large step being taken forward with the technology of the district, primarily in the classrooms. I'm well aware that most of the teachers at the high school level are still using Elmos, which I don't know, I don't really see much anywhere else, but most of the rest of the county has moved on to smart boards, and the next generation beyond smart boards. I mean, smart boards are like 15 years ago now. I'm wondering if that has been talked about, is in here somewhere, like kind of embedded, that I have not seen. If technology has become any question that we're looking to get better at as a district.
Well, I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Miga, because I think it's a fair question. And I think it really relates to that instructional model that we're articulating through this plan. So Chrissy, do you want to talk a little bit about that and where technology would fit into that conversation?
Sure, happy to. I think that, when you think about technology, I mean, certainly, if you look at some of our work actually prior to COVID and the pandemic, we were pretty heavily focused on, moving one-to-one with our technology systems. We had a multi-year plan to go from, we started at some of the upper grades, particularly at Dake, which Ms. Kramer led a lot of that work, to go one-to-one one, and then we had a multi-year plan. And then COVID hit, and boom, there it was. Everybody was one-to-one. And so one of the important approaches we've always had, though, when considering technology, is that we really view it as that tool. And so a lot of the work that we're doing right now really has to come first. I personally think it would be bad practice to say, let's think about the technology we want to put in place without a really solid instructional model as well as curriculum framework. And so those are all components, though, regarding technology, thinking about its use, thinking about where it will really enhance our curriculum and instruction. Those are pieces that we hope to build in as we build both the instructional model and the curriculum work moving forward. And so I'm hoping that some of the needs that we see around instruction curriculum as we build those two pieces will also help us to figure out exactly what the training will be and the tools, technology tools that we need to match it. Because I have seen too, there be missteps when you buy all the fancy technology, but then you don't really know how to properly use it or use it most effectively. So these are some of those pieces that come first, but technology is part of that day-to-day experience for a teacher. So I'm hoping that we continue to grow that, and we'll integrate that as part of these plans as we move forward.
Thanks, Chris. And I would just add too that, technology obviously is changing at light speed, and the smart boards, being a teacher that was in a classroom when that smart board first came out, that was something that we gravitated to. It was new, it was flashy. We thought that the interactivity of the smart boards were going to revolutionize our classrooms. But in the end, it didn't. And here at West Irondequoit, we made a commitment to in-focus projectors. And now what we found is that, again, technology is changing so rapidly. We're moving towards a 2-in-1 computer where students have tablets, right? And so we have casting software and abilities where a teacher can walk around the room, interact with their students, and still cast to that projector and write on it, right? And don't have to be tethered to the smart board. That was always an issue I know I experienced as a teacher, and some of the feedback that we got through the process from teachers as I was an administrator in a building and then so on. And students will have those interactive notebooks with them, whether it's a small group, individual work, they can take them home. We're using O365, we have Schoology, a bunch of other things. We're constantly looking for opportunities to incorporate technology, again, as a resource, as a tool to enhance that learning, but it starts with that foundational instructional model. So Andy, I look forward to, it sounds like I think you said you had a 2-year-old, maybe you have some other children, your children experiencing a really technologically rich environment here at West Irondequoit, but at the core of that is going to be, that instructional model and what they're learning and how we're using those tools to enhance that. So, any follow-up questions, Andy, before we go to the next person? I just want to be mindful of people's time.
Yeah, no, I understand people's time. I mean, I'm a teacher of 15 years myself. I had smart boards when I started teaching. We've moved on to the next generation. I could agree with you that, yeah, tethering a little bit to the smart board wasn't ideal, but it was kind of an evolution to what we've moved to now, similar to what you talked about with the 2-to-1. I just don't see any of that in Irondequoit, very little of it. I mean, Microsoft Office, I mean, that's great, but that's not cutting edge. I mean, less how you're using the smart notebook. It just seems to be something that's lacking. And, I got to disagree a little bit respectfully, of course, with saying, well, we need the instructional model for, I think West Irondequoit has had a pretty solid instructional model for a lot of years now, that they were probably capable of moving in this direction, but for whatever reason over, however long we failed to do so. But just pointing out that, and I'm glad that it is infused in here, and it's going to be something that we continue to look at.
Yep. And you hit the nail on the head, right? Is that, this plan really, we had all the best intentions, right? But that's the idea behind this plan. this plan is going to help us to stay focused and move that work forward. And one thing that I'll add just as an aside, so that you're aware and other listeners are aware, we're now conducting a technology review across the district this year that will help us to take a look at our structure and some of the things that we're doing around systems and operations to even further enhance that. So great question, Annie. I appreciate you answering that or asking that, excuse me.
Dr. Johnson, can I just add one thing? Our technology director is one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. His name's Dan Fullerton. So he'll do a tremendous job of this review, and I know we'll be right where we need to be. He's a really smart guy.
Thanks, Jeff. Why don't we bring up Mrs. Tuff, and then we'll move on. Again, I just want to be mindful of people's time. We're going to probably go past 7:30, and that's okay. Probably looking a little bit more like 7:45, just so folks, if you have things that you have to do at home with your family and whatnot, you can plan for that. So let's bring up Mrs. Tuff.
She's good to go.
Mrs. Tuff, how we doing tonight?
Oh, I'll ask her to unmute. I think she muted. There we go.
Sorry, I had to unmute.
You're good. We can hear you.
Am I good now? Okay. I don't actually have a question. I just wanted to give my feedback a little bit. I wanted to actually give kudos.
I think we just lost him.
Sorry. Yeah.
Mrs. Tuff.
Yeah. Try again there, Allison. Sorry about that.
You're still there,
Did
Mrs.
I
Tuff?
Yeah,
totally
I was
cut
sorry.
out?
No,
Yeah,
you
sorry about
did
that.
totally cut out. Yeah, you just got you when you started. So if you could just start again with your comment.
Oh, gosh. Okay, sorry. So yeah, no, I just wanted to give kudos to the district for recognizing the importance of diversity, inclusion, and equity for our student population and for our whole really community. I think that it frustrates me a bit and kind of worries me a bit when I hear people fight against it, because there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of wrong focus out there, and I can't imagine that this wouldn't do anything but benefit everyone in our community. Also, just want to point out to everybody that diversity, equity, and inclusion, it doesn't just have to do with race, and that seems what the focus tends to be, and a lot of the conversations tend to be around, which is extremely important, but it's also regarding ethnicity, culture, religion, sexuality, students with disability or neurodivergent minds, and including and making access to everything in our school district and system equitable. Everyone benefits from that, and so I appreciate the steps that are being taken to improve that in our district. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, thank you, Allison. I appreciate that. And tonight's really not the purpose of tonight isn't to go into our inquiry projects and some of the different things. We have had a community connection on that in the past, and if people are interested in that, we can direct you some of that information or even talk more personally about that. Because you're right, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and making sure that people have access to the right information and that we're transparent is critical, so that we continue to foster that trust between ourselves and the community and our parents and families. So, but why don't we go and move on here, Jeff, and we'll get into implementation systems, okay?
All right. Well, hi, everybody. So in implementation systems, one of the big rocks really is focused on staff recruitment and retention. And it's really focusing our practices on our alignment across our K-12 continuum for hiring to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we are really spending some time looking at ways to enhance our practices around recruiting and retaining a very high quality staff that's really reflective of our entire West Irondequoit community. So to do that, we are focusing our work over the course of the next few years tied to the strategic plan on evaluating and adjusting our recruitment processes. Again, looking for that alignment. What are some of the strengths and pieces that we need to look at, including implicit bias training? And then within that, looking for that ways to create that consistent and equitable hiring protocols. So that is coming off of work around job descriptions, looking at ways that we can recruit. What does our interviewing and hiring practices look like all the way through? So with that, we do have a subcommittee that's working together to look at this. And we are also working in a district with all of our building leaders within that to, again, focus and strengthen in that area. We can go to the next slide. Thanks, Jeff. Another piece is really looking at our systems for equity and experiences. So we're looking at how are we ensuring that our policies and our systems are in place to provide that equity for all students. So tied to the work with curriculum and instruction and the people, it's also looking at our pre-referral model. How are we analyzing our current continuum of systems and supports for students? So our multi-tiered system of supports, our RTI systems, and how do we strengthen that and the communication and make sure that what we have in place matches what all of our students need to grow. So those are some of the areas within implementation systems that we're working on in that area around our diversity, equity, and inclusion for all students. Is there any questions? All right, so with it, I believe next is Mr. Brennan.
Actually, I think this one's me.
Oh, sorry.
Communication, yeah.
Jeff, did
and,
we jump over a slide though?
did
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Brennan.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. So also within that kind of with the big rock of implementation systems, that kind of falls within some of my responsibilities in the district is dealing with facilities. So we know we have a fantastic community. We've also invested a lot of assets into our facilities. And so one thing we want to take a look at through the strategic plan is, are we effectively communicating and providing opportunities for community use of our facilities, both on a formal basis, where they would actually sign out a space, but also informal basis too. Because we want to make sure that we're always maintaining that close community tie to those facilities specifically, and then how do those use of the facilities incorporate within the district's educational uses for the same facilities in terms of use of specific, like the tennis courts during the school day or our track and field. So these are the areas that we're reviewing this year. And again, it's kind of to look at what we're doing, make sure we're effectively communicating access to those pieces, and look at ways that we can make it more accessible to our community members, while at the same time overall supporting our educational mission.
All right, good to go here. Okay, thanks, Mr. Brennan. So communication, and one thing we did recently in the last couple months, pretty much right around the start of the school year, was to remake our website. My goal in this role is to make sure that our parents and our guardians and our families are reading what gets sent home. And I think to do that, it needs to be in a digestible format. I think we've talked a lot as a district about making sure it's readable in a digital format, and also it hits our community, which is a diverse community. So actually, Dr. Johnson was the first one that brought SMORE to me, and that's the new platform we're using for all of our school communication home. I think it's easy for us to use. I think it's easier for the user to use, and most important, I think our families, I know if you're like me, I read a lot of my stuff on my phone, and SMORE actually appears on your phone in a readable format. You don't have to pinch your fingers and try to make things bigger. It's right there on your screen. It also you can translate it with one click to whatever language you want. And I think that's really important in our community too. We wanted to make sure that everyone could read what we were sending home and not have to guess at it. So we switched to that within the last couple months. And we also did a similar thing with our school newsletters home. And I wanted to make sure that those were all similar throughout all of our buildings, that we were all having, the same type of content. And also we celebrated what we were doing. I wanted our principals and our staff to kind of take the pictures and celebrate what our students are doing, because that's what I think parents want to see. I'm a parent. I want to see it. I don't want to see a 15-page or 20-page newsletter coming home. I don't know if I have time for that. I don't know if you do, but we want to kind of keep it very visual, easy to digest, so you can see what's going on in our classrooms and see the celebrations happening. So that's kind of what my goal has been in the last couple of months. And I've had a tremendous help from my assistant, Pat Hartman. She's the best. And it's been great teamwork in implementing that stuff and the strategic plan booklet. That was really, we wanted to try to get that again into something that's digestible for our families and our parents and guardians to read and understand what we're trying to do here. So, because if we're sending it at home and you're not reading it, then we're failing. So anyone who has feedback on that, I'd love to hear what you think about it in an email or in this format. But we're pretty happy with engagement. One of the things SMORE lets us do is I can see how many clicks all these letters home and all these newsletters home or how many they're getting. So I know if there's 160 people at Listwood that have read the school newsletter. I know if there's 50, if there's only 50, we have a problem. So it's a good way to adapt or to analyze our content and make sure it's going to where it's directed. So it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed kind of changing with the times too.
All right, so we'll pause there and offer up an opportunity for any questions. Before we get into our final big rock here, our focus area, I think we have a
Mr.
hand up. Yep.
Mr. Falaco's back. Hi, Mr. Falaco, your mic is
hello.
open, sir.
Yeah, this one's a positive one. Don't worry. I have to say, Dr. Johnson, from the beginning, COVID in particular, I think the communication from the district's been outstanding. I think Jeff's done a good job. Principal of my kid's school has done a great job. So this is an area where I definitely think you guys are doing great work and wanted to commend you for that.
Thank you, Andy. We appreciate that. And I would just point out, again, as Jeff described, our communication really, teaching and learning is an interactive process. And we were committed to this prior, and I think through the strategic plan, we were able to tease that out in a little more detail of what are some of those ways that we can not only connect people with information and thereby continue to, reflect this sense of transparency and also include our families, our staff, our students in the conversation about what we do, how we're going to do it, what goes into that, right? And have conversations. I mean, we invite questions, whether they're, softball questions, whether they're complimentary or the tough ones. Because I think one thing that we all agree on here that I've noticed through my conversations is that by doing that, it pushes our thoughts to a deeper level. We make better decisions because of that. So I just appreciate that. I appreciate the group that's here with us tonight. Keep the questions coming, even if you have some thoughts after the session ends. So thank you.
And one thing I forgot to mention, Dr. Johnson, was we did a survey of our parents and guardians to say, what do you want to see in the school newsletter so you get home from your buildings? What do you want to see? And we kind of tailored our SMORE content for the newsletters from the feedback we got from our parents. So I think that was a cool thing too.
Yeah, and I want to turn it over for well-being of self and others. But before I do that, I do want to give a plug to our Board of Education. And not just because Ann's here with us tonight, but because I think it's important that people recognize this, and I'm sure that they do. One complaint that you often hear in communities is that, we have these elected officials and they fail to engage in the process, right? I would tell you wholeheartedly as a superintendent, our Board of Education is phenomenal about pushing us, like I said, the questions, the curiosity, the engagement, it's phenomenal. And I think that is a reflection of our community. And I think that's one of the points of pride. What brings people to Irondequoit is that level of investment. And we don't want to lose that. We don't want to discourage that. We only want to fan that and foster that. So I really appreciate that. Turn over to well-being and self and others. Ann, anything to add?
No, I just wanted to just bring up one other point that I didn't before, and I appreciate that, what your words, Dr. Johnson. I want to let people know that our board has been fully supportive of this, the whole strategic plan process, and that we do have incorporated as a board goal supporting the implementation. So this is, as Dr. Johnson said early on, this is not something that we're tucking away, so that we take it very seriously as well. So it was not only being involved right from the beginning, but making sure that we support that moving forward.
Thank you. All right, well-being of self and others.
Sorry, having trouble on muting. So as we look at the next big rock of well-being of self and community, we're really focusing on continuing to create that welcoming and inclusive community. So with that, we're looking at, and we'll continue to look at, a couple different things. Our code of conduct and updating that to make sure that that matches and is revised based on our needs, and that creating that welcome and inclusive community, and also creating a Board of Education policy on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So really in collaboration with a subcommittee to lead that, we're unpacking a lot of that work, creating that and having that aligned to our district systems and goals. And I don't know, Dr. Johnson, if you want to add anything, or Chrissy, to that.
Well, Dr. Johnson?
I'll wait for you. Go ahead.
I was going to say I'll talk a little bit to it on the next slide. So if you want to add anything first, that's great.
Yeah, I would just add that embedded in this is the district's commitment to such things as restorative practices, social emotional wellness. So as we take a look at our policies, our regulations, things like our code of conduct, we're also continuing to infuse those into our day-to-day operations and interactions. So again, there's going to be ongoing work around those things. So appreciate that.
Actually, sorry, Ms. Kramer, this one's yours. You want to go?
I think you're on mute, Michelle.
That is the one we just talked about. I think we just need to go to the next one.
Oh, thank you. So that is me. All right. So, as Ms. Kramer mentioned, and we've seen this throughout. And yes, we do have a DEI coalition that has been in place since last year with a representative of both our staff, our community members, parents, students, and we continue to look at human resources as a subcommittee, curriculum, as well as family engagement. I think it's really important too. One of the other ways that we're continuing to look at how we're going to ensure, diversity, equity, inclusion is a part of our school community is, through our work from the New York State culturally responsive and sustaining framework. And so I think it's important, not only did we have this huge strategic plan work in place where there was that desire and that came through really strongly through the strategic plan committee to support DEI through our school community. But we are also really staying in line with this call to action from New York State to support DEI in our schools. And also, I mean, they have released this framework of standards that really is meant to guide us through our work. And so I know there were some questions about that work and the need for it, but it is also helping us really stay aligned to the New York State standards. And we are being very methodical and thoughtful about how this work looks in classrooms, because I really appreciated Ms. Tuff's point too. It's not just one component that we're looking to support. It really is, how are we supporting our entire school community? And that includes the students as well. So on the next slide,
Can I jump in on that one real quick,
Sure.
Chrissy? Just say a few things. So I want to make sure that explicitly we call some attention to that around the framework. The New York State Cultural Responsive and Sustaining Framework. We've had that question before, right? And again, I appreciate the point around transparency, around misinformation, but at the bottom, the bottom line is the state has issued these requirements, these standards. And what we're doing is we're really committed to infusing those, as we should. That was the directive of the state, but also to helping it to raise a level of awareness about those. They didn't make a huge splash, I think, in schools visibly in the community when they first came out. And I think they've been out, Chrissy, 2 years, 19, right? Yeah. And so again, I think somebody in the chat made a point just around communication, CRT. Opportunities like tonight are exactly, aimed at that transparent communication, that dialogue that I think people are seeking, that I think is reflected in some of those comments. We are not teaching CRT. All right. We've had community connections in the past. We're putting it into almost every family bulletin that goes home, just snippets of information for folks so that they can continue to digest that, remind people of those factors, and just really talk about the inquiry approach that we're taking into that work. So I know that there was a call in the chat for more of an effort to share information. We want to be transparent. And that is a commitment that we've made over the last 2+ years. As we've talked about this, you're right. Historically, schools haven't been great at inviting people into that conversation. We've kind of owned that conversation around what we teach within the school and the community within. And the Coalition for DEI, some of the things that we're doing around the district curriculum council, conversations like this are all opportunities for people to be included in that, to raise their voice, to speak out, to have input into those things. And so I just, again, want to say I appreciate everybody's time tonight in that. And we will continue to make that an area of focus as we move forward. Back to you, Chrissy. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that was a great transition to our last big rock slide, which is really ensuring through this strategic plan that voice and representation of all of our community members is included within our work. I have seen our teachers be so purposeful about including student voice and the opportunities that they have through the work that they're doing on a daily basis. I, really appreciate all of the efforts of our leadership staff to make sure that, our families feel communicated with, and that, we continue to be transparent, as Dr. Johnson shared, on the pieces that we are putting forth and the work that we are doing. And so that continues to be be a focus and will be a big part of this strategic plan, ensuring that representation and voice of all of our community.
Okay, so it's about 7:45. We worked our way through kind of the highlights of the plan. Just want to, again, offer up an opportunity if there's anyone that was able to join us tonight that has a question they want to pose before we conclude the session. We'd be happy to take those. Or if there's a point you would like to make, we just invite that. Okay, folks. Well, thank you for spending the last hour and 15 minutes with us tonight to learn more about, the vision, the commitments that we're making here as a district that demonstrates your level of investment in your children, in our schools, in our community. We appreciate that. And again, please know that this conversation doesn't stop here. You can email myself or any of us or the building principals, whoever is your direct tie for communication or your person that you're most comfortable with. Just reach out with questions, or if you would like more information, happy to share that. We look forward to seeing you along the way and continuing this work together. We really appreciate the partnership. Thank you to our panelists. Any final words from anyone? Beautiful.
Thanks, everybody. We will make this available on our website, this video,
That's a great final word.
and a strategic plan page that we have. So.
Yep. All right, folks. Have a great night. Thank you so much for your time.